presentation I said, and now for something completely similar, because it will be. So you've heard it from the wings side of life, and now you're going to hear it from the wheels side of life. So I'm not going to go into Welsh Automotive Forum. It's very similar in organisation to John and aerospace. But I'd like to run through what I prepared as the agenda for my presentation. So I'm going to give you some industry facts and figures, going to talk about supply chain structures, then we'll start looking at some of the challenges and within there some of the opportunities. I want to talk a little bit about the green agenda and what that means for us here in Wales and wider, look at some actions and recommendations, and then answer any questions you have. If you think the future is going to be all about vehicles that we're going to drive that look like this, well, don't worry, because actually they might even look like that. This is a new Nissan that'll come forward. This is a hybrid vehicle. So the future doesn't have to be too scary in terms of vehicle technology going forward. Okay, so some facts and figures about the industry sector that I work in. And these are just a list of the names of the companies that actually operate within the UK. Many people might think that automotive in the UK has gone. As my chairman, Professor Garol Rees, would say, might think it's gone the way of the gas lamp. Well, it hasn't. Here it is, some familiar names and perhaps some names that aren't quite so familiar. But it gives you an idea of the depth and breadth both in cars, in motorsport, in buses, off-highway, etc. that is part and parcel of the UK automotive sector. And this is the carry-on slide, and you can see the population on the map of the UK. In Wales, number 8, of course, is the engine plant at Bridgend. That's Ford. It also supplies V8 engines to Jaguar and Land Rover and is extremely busy. 29 at the top of Wales on D side, of course, is Toyota. And that supplies engines to Toyota in Burnaston. So 31 companies listed here. I guess we could probably add in quite a few motorsport companies. And motorsport for the UK is pretty important as well. It's probably now about 20 companies involved in motorsport. Some we know at Formula One. We have M Sport in Cumbria looking after Ford and the World Rally Championship cars that they make there. So motorsport actually is quite an important sector for us as well. Now, I put this up because I think, again, it's worthwhile looking at the volumes of production here and the scale of supply chain that follows from that. And you can see from the highs probably coming in here around about 2004, 1.6 million vehicles made in the UK. Of course, in 2007-8 and hitting then in 2009, the financial recession caused a dramatic effect on the vehicle industry. And companies like Honda, based in Swindon, said, sorry guys, we're stopping production now for 3 or 4 months. And you are like the supply chain. You said, sorry, what did you just say? We're going to stop production for 3 to 4 months. Yeah, but what are we supposed to do? Well, I don't know, maybe you can do some training or something, or paint the shop floor or whatever. It was a massive problem. And you can see the effect here coming from 1.6 million vehicles down to just under 1 million. A massive, massive hit in the industry. And we lost a lot of people. We lost probably, well, I guess in Wales, over this period, we've probably lost 5,000 people. And this is a story in itself, that as the industry got busier in the UK at this particular point here, a lot of the vehicle makers and their major tier 1 companies went abroad and sourced globally. It was the thing to do. We'll go off to Eastern Europe, we'll go to China, we'll go to India, we'll find all the components, we'll turn our back on the UK. Until now, 2010, 1.2, 2011, probably about 1.4, and 2012, closer to 1.6. It's coming back again. It's coming back again, but for us here in Wales, what does this mean? Well, I said we've probably lost about 5,000 people. So similar to John, we are probably about 24,000 people. We have our 2 engine plants. Calsonic, based in Llanelli, is what we call a system integrator, or tier 0.5. They produce a complete system. Most of our international component plants produce a given product. The engine plants are obvious, they produce engines. But we have metal pressing companies, we have interiors, audio, etc. They predominantly supply into the UK vehicle plants, but also do export as well. And we have probably about 110, 120 related SMEs that are part of the supply chain. I mentioned the hollowing out aspect, so the global companies based in the UK, the Jags, the Hondas, the Toyotas, the Nissans, they went foraging and found their components worldwide. Now they want to start to bring it back again. This is causing us quite a lot of headache in the supply chain currently, but it's a good headache. Well, this is what it's all about. This is a car broken down. You can tell the model. This is not a current slide, but it gives you an idea of the complexity of components. And if we added them all up, it would probably come close to 20,000. They've got to be sourced, they've got to be manufactured, they've got to be assembled and put into the assembly plant itself, comes out into the marketplace, and we buy them. And if we like them, we buy a lot of them. But in terms of that complexity, you can understand why companies now in the UK are looking to buy more and more from UK sources. The current issue, as I've just said, really is that having gone abroad to find the components, now they want to come back where assemblies come from. So it is the engines, it is the interior trims, etc. Powertrain, chassis coming together. Tier 2, Tier 3 are subcomponents, pressings, plastic injection mouldings, forgings, etc. Now, Wales is predominantly a component manufacturer at Tier 1 level. We don't have any vehicle assembly here, although I do recognise that we do have a couple of niche vehicle assemblers. We do have some motorsport companies, but in the main, Wales and its automotive sector is predominantly at Tier 1 level. And those Tier 1s actually don't even buy an awful lot of their componentry from Wales or the UK. A lot of it comes in from outside. So there's an opportunity there that we can actually start to look at Tier 2 and Tier 3 for us in Wales, and we're working with the Tier 1 companies here to try and change that picture. We could be successful in getting more Tier 1 companies. We were very successful in the 80s of bringing inward investment here to Wales. That's dried up a little bit, but I think there's opportunity of increasing that. But I think it's probably Tier 2 level that we could really see an opportunity of bringing more into Wales. We can talk about clusters and networks. John, you sort of touched on it a little bit in your collaborative design of your supply chains. But I think we can do more in this area here of actually clustering things together. We could also add in here motorsport. We can add in other systems, I guess. But we can bring these things together. And I'm not getting into the Porter definition for the academics in the room that want to get into Porter's definition of clusters. I'm using this really as a sort of a generic. And it's something we're starting to do, so we are pulling together those that are involved in powertrain, both current and future. We're looking at door systems and their supply chains and pulling those together. And I think Johnny mentioned, we talk about value chain, I talk about value networks. And I see this as actually something new. So this is very much in the area of new technology. So if we're talking about current powertrain, internal combustion engine, gearbox, axle, the new powertrains, electric motors, drive systems, control systems, etc. These are new technologies that are coming together. Now the vehicle makers want these new technologies, and you'll see in a minute a roadmap of where we're going with that. We have currently a sort of differential between the vehicle makers that want these products, some of the small companies that have actually made them, and then a middle land, because the vehicle makers say, well, we want you, Tier 1, to make 20,000 of these. And the Tier 1 says, well, that's too small. I'm geared up to make 200,000. I can't make 20,000. Okay, SME, we'd like you to make 20,000 of these. Well, that's far too big. I can make 5,000, but I can't make 20,000. Oh. So we have a slight problem in the marketplace of, in the future, I'm talking about probably 2 to 3 years' time, of making volumes up to 20,000. Now, there could be electric motors, turbochargers, etc. And I know, looking at our colleagues here from Dennis Ferranti, we've been talking to you perhaps about how we can overcome this middle ground area of making what we're calling proving technologies because the tier ones aren't geared up for it, and the SMEs, quite frankly, aren't geared up for it. So this is an interesting area. It's a great opportunity in supply chain terms as new technologies are bringing opportunity. It's a challenge, of course it is, but there could be a solution to satisfy that opportunity. Talking of challenges, these are some of the ones that we're currently facing. And okay, the macroeconomic environment. Western markets are flat in terms of sales, they're very flat. And we probably don't see any growth in the European market until about 2014-15. Everybody's concerned Greece, the euro aspect there, but currently Brazil, Russia, India, China, the BRICS are really pulling the market drivers, and people like Jaguar Land Rover seeing fantastic growth and demand coming from countries like this. Last year, Jaguar alone, a 60% increase in demand coming from China. Hence the reason that they're putting in a third shift at Halewood. The success of the new Evoque has been fantastic. Another 1,000 people, that's trebled the size of that plant in the last 18 months, 2 years. So global markets, not local markets, are really driving the automotive sector for us here in the UK. And of course, the pound against the euro at the moment is really attractive, and we're seeing some great advantage under that heading. Localization is now coming back. Companies like Jaguar Land Rover, like General Motors, are genuinely seeking to find how they can buy more from UK. Music to my ears, because I'm desperately trying to find companies that can satisfy that supply chain. It is a genuine request. We've probably had about half a dozen companies in the last 2 years that are now supplying into GM. That's the Vauxhall plant at Ellesmere Port. And recently a company called Cobra, who were based in Welsh, now moving to a brand new factory in Wrexham, won a contract, I think it was about £11 million. They see themselves growing from a £20 million business to 80. Fantastic news, can be done. We'd rely on government. It's a pity Andrew's gone because he still has links, obviously. We work very closely with the government, as you can see by the logo at the bottom. We're part funded, as John is, by Welsh Government. We talk extensively about how we can help companies grow now into this new marketplace. They've come through recession, but now they've got to grow. They need more kit, they need more people. So localization is now very much back on the agenda for us, and we're looking for companies to come in and support the industry. Pressure on business performance. We've heard about quality, cost, delivery. Cost still is predominantly the main thing, and total acquisition cost now is largely being understood by the purchasing people at the vehicle maker and tier one level, thank goodness. Up until recently, it was all about unit cost. That's all they were interested in, unit cost. Delivery, quality was a given. I'm just after price. Total acquisition cost now means that they can look at a wider picture, and it's not necessarily totally about unit cost, it's the total acquisition cost. Innovation, I think that's a given. Everybody's looking for innovation. Legislation, reducing the burden of legislation. Funding, and I'll talk about that under access to funding, and skills. And for me, skills is one of the biggest issues and things that we can talk about. So there's some of the pressures that are currently on businesses. Climate change agenda is forcing the way technology is working, mobility in general, and of course we're under targets that we have to achieve of reducing the CO2 level. Major impact onto companies. Some are doing it better than others or more cleverly. Aston Martin has found a novel way of still producing V12 cars, but has formed this alliance with Toyota. So it now has the Toyota Aygo, I think it is, that has an Aston Martin front grille. And this on its fleet average has reduced the CO2. Still makes a hell of a lot of V12 cars, but there we are. Technology, and I'll show you the vehicle roadmap for the next slide. Shortage of skills, capacity to deliver. We're almost getting to a point now in the UK where the demand for components is actually starting to hit capacity level. So from the 2007, 8, 9 figures of reducing demand, now we're into a new phase, increasing demand, increasing requirement from the tier companies, but we're almost hitting capacity. That means we've got to go out into the world and pull companies in. And one of my missions is to try and bring companies into Wales, of course. Access to funding. Well, you'll appreciate this. And Phil talked about the banking side of life. Well, our companies talk to the banking side of life every day and have major issues. And something we're battling with is to try and get the finance side balanced to the companies so that they can actually take advantage of a growing marketplace. I won't go through this in detail, but you can see this is a consensus roadmap brought together by the vehicle makers in the UK and some European as to how we see ourselves growing forward. And you can see our good old internal combustion engine carries life right through to 2040. It might have different fuel going in it, but it's still there in terms of engine production. We go through the hybrids, the electric motors, the range extended engines. We have technology breakthroughs, battery technology breakthroughs coming through, to the start then of fuel cell and hydrogen fuel cell technology vehicles. This probably is on a timeline of 2020. We actually think this timeline is coming closer, probably even to about 2015, and we're doing an awful lot of work with universities and other technology companies and vehicle makers, because this is now starting to move. Some time ago, hydrogen was way out there. It was never going to happen. It was something that you could talk about. It's actually becoming more of a reality. And creation of hydrogen is also becoming much more the reality than just a pipe dream and a wish. So this is a consensus roadmap. This is how it's going to be. And I think the winners in this next phase here will be vehicles like the Vauxhall Ampera or the Chevy Volt, which is a range extended vehicle, electric power, but a small engine that drives a generator that charges the battery. Will give you something like 400-mile range, as opposed to a pure EV, which is probably closer to 100. Similarly, we have a UK sourcing roadmap. So this is where our industry sees itself going in terms of the short-term, medium, and perhaps longer term. And you'll see here that we still need to look at shop floor competitiveness, lean methodology. Automotive has been there for years. We still have to. It's not something you do one day and forget about it. It's continuous. Total supply chain cost modeling, finance, and then we're looking at these areas as to where we can actually build our strength. Interiors, power and body train, electronics, electrics, and then moving into the sort of longer term. But even longer term, I mean, we're already here at 2012 now, so even this that was produced a couple of years ago is starting to get out of date. But what it means is that the industry's got its act together, and I'm borrowing these slides from the Automotive Council, which was pulled together to form a better liaison with government. And they've done a hell of a lot of great work in getting technology and supply chains working together. Now, getting onto the greener agenda, I've used this quite a few times now in my presentations, driving towards a greener Wales. And quite cleverly, we can see what we've done. We've taken transport off the roads. Well, it wasn't intended to be that way. I thought it was just a nice picture. But what it does mean is that we are looking at this. We're under pressure to reduce our CO2 in vehicles and improve the environment. So what does this mean? Well, for us, we started something called the Wales Green Automotive Agenda. This was an agreement with Welsh Government and started to bring us into areas that we wouldn't naturally find ourselves in. But it does open the door for other opportunities because we're now starting to work in these different sectors. So in terms of the vehicle and vehicle technology, and coming back to John's slide, which showed the hamburger being the value out of the car, well, actually, okay, biomass. Yes, we're going to use our waste food. Yes, we're going to use various forms of waste, pull it all together, form biomass, form biomethane. Methane we can use as a transport fuel. Yes, we can use electric, of course we can. We can work with wind, wave, biomass, etc. So suddenly we found ourselves actually within the energy sector by a default, perhaps, but we knew we were going to get involved in this area. So as an automotive forum, we're actually now talking to our colleagues in energy. And if we're talking about creating transport for the future, we're talking to all our colleagues about mobility. Andrew from Siemens is involved in infrastructure in cities. Well, so are we. Because if we're going to have mobility, We don't want to be so jammed in our cities that we can't actually enjoy the cars of the future because there's nowhere to drive them. Then we're involved in the infrastructure. And if we've got all that, how do we as an industry take advantage of the things that have to be built, whether it's a wind turbine or whatever? So our mission now is, within the Automotive Forum, to get more involved in energy, work with the government on transport, work with the cities, local authorities on infrastructure, and help the industry to get into those marketplaces to take advantage of what's coming forward. And it's a massive market. In terms of public procurement, well, there are things like refuse vehicles and buses that are going around the place that could be running on biofuel. And why not? We're talking to probably all of the local authorities in Wales, trying to work out what we can do to help their transport guys, because believe you me, they're sitting there scratching their heads thinking, the cheapest thing I can buy is another diesel bus, another diesel refuse vehicle, but I can't because I've got my CO2 target to bring down. What the hell do I do? Why don't you run it on biofuel? Fantastic. How do I get one? Well, you can go and buy one. Wales is slightly disadvantaged at the moment that we don't have sufficient funding that's available in England and Scotland to support this activity. So the Green Bus Fund that you can have in England and Scotland isn't currently available in Wales. Now, I've lobbied hard, both here, Westminster, Secretary of State. We still don't have a Green Bus Fund. I'm still working on it. Gary?
I was going to say, why don't they partner up with Toyota and reduce the green bit like that? Sorry,
well,
you mentioned that, you're putting the Aston Martin front on it. Well, put a bus front on it.
Well, actually, you're not too far away from the mark, because that is sort of happening. And people like MAN and other bus companies are now getting their act together to produce these, but they're still expensive. And for a fleet operator to have that expense, extra expense, isn't what they want to do. So this is where we come in to work with the government to say, can't we have this fund? We can bring people in as operators of these vehicles. Procurement for local authorities means we can do this, and we've got companies ready to do the conversion. So we're actually getting more business for these companies here in Wales. So green means new opportunities for us. Yes, it's a challenge. Yes, it's an opportunity. But these are the sort of things that we want to work on. And these are some of the actions and recommendations as I see it going forward. We're in continuous dialogue with the UK vehicle makers, especially Jaguar and Land Rover, that just seem to be steamrolling ahead. We're talking to GM a hell of a lot, BMW Mini, Nissan, who are doing fantastic work, and also Honda, Toyota. And then with some technology companies as well. We're trying to lever the advantage for Wales. We have a fantastic story to tell here. We don't make enough of it. We started some 2 years ago a low carbon vehicle cluster. Again, sometimes within Welsh Government we get funding to do something for a limited period and we stop. We've got to carry on with these things. We can't have these stop-start initiatives. We've got to carry something through as a momentum. We've got enough critical mass now in this cluster to carry it through. It does need the government support. If we don't do these things, we fall off the edge. And we see other places taking advantage, which is a real sticker in my heart. We've got now a low-carbon park. We have Deeside, of course, not too far away. That's been given enterprise zone status and now has 100% capital allowance status as well. And in South Wales, in Ebbw Vale, we have the Automotive Enterprise Park. And it's great to see that this is now getting a focal and centre of attention. And for us, that means we can bring new investors into Wales. I put this one in red because I think this, for me, is one of our USPs. If we haven't got the skills that people want, we haven't got anything. On a global basis, and certainly a European basis, if we haven't got the skills, people aren't going to come. And I've heard that from the vehicle makers around the patch. We're doing a good job. We need to really strengthen this. It's working with the universities, the colleges, the schools, building this resource, this team, this pool of people. Because if we don't have the strong skills base, or even an overflow of skills, we're going to be sunk. That's a real critical factor for me. We work with the Welsh Government on foreign direct investment, of course. We want to assist with the development of hydrogen because we can see that as being key. We're working with Bangor on thermoplastics and looking at a TSB project on thermoplastics. That opens up a new technology area and again new opportunities for new suppliers to come into the marketplace. We're working with local authorities on vehicle procurement and on the Green Bus Fund, of course. And for me, I'd like to see Wales improve its marketing. I think we're poor. I think we're poor at sending out the message of what we're capable of, the competencies that reside in the universities. I think universities need to be better at marketing what goes on inside. You've got so many hidden jewels in Wales in the universities. We don't take account of it, we don't bottle it up, we don't sell it very well. And for me, I think we can do a hell of a lot better in marketing Wales because the time is right. It's out there, it's waiting for us. We've got to go and grab it. And really, this is my last slide and my conclusional slide that says we need to rebalance our economy. We all know that. We've got to move from this public sector service side into the manufacturing side and engineering side, and we can do it. The climate change agenda is forcing us to move away from what we had into the green and new technology areas. And I can see that that's really going to be the key driver going forward. We have to protect our environment. Massive opportunity in technology and supply chain. If we're going to have mobility in the future, if we're not going to clog our cities up, we are going to have mobility. It can look nice and sexy like this car here. A fantastic opportunity for people in engineering, manufacturing to get stuck in here and develop things. And if we can do all of that, then I think Wales has a great opportunity of holding the key for our future success. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.